how do U.S. laws address these kinds of things? Are we just kind of lumping everybody together?
Well, at some point, I think we do need to get to the root causes of what's happening in these countries. And I think that that's, as Alan said, the number of kids coming into New York City, unaccompanied immigrant kids, have been about 4,500 this fiscal year. In 2014, it was higher. 2015, it was lower. So we're going back up again. And it's going to be the new normal if we don't sort of address the root causes within these countries, the issues of poverty and gang violence.
The reason I ask is that there's a certain scandal related to what happened during World War II, where it was possible that an Anne Frank could have wound up coming to the United States. She had all of the qualifications, and yet she was denied that access. So are we seeing something similar here? Have we not learned from our past history?
Right now, we have the greatest migration of people around the globe, and I think that the U.S. does have to come to terms with our great sort of refugee crisis is coming from Central America, and I think we do need to address it. And I think, as you talked about the different legal services that we offer, this idea that these are refugees, not migrants. They are fleeing persecution and violence in their home countries.
But so are refugees from Syria and from Iraq. Has the whole thing wound up becoming lumped together?
I think for us, for the Children's Defense Fund, we really want to focus on the children. I think also with Terra Firma, this idea that children are children, regardless of where they come from, and we need to make sure that we support and protect them and offer them the services and the supports that they need to thrive and survive, regardless of where they came from.
Is it tougher now because of all the political rhetoric?
For me, I'll tell you what's tough. I work at a health center that serves a large Mexican and newly arrived Muslim population from West Africa. And I have kids coming to my clinic saying, like, why is a presidential candidate talking about our people this way? That makes my job really difficult. And, from that standpoint, it's pretty horrendous.
I'm speaking with Dr. Alan Shapiro, medical director and co-founder of Terra Firma, and Kimberly Chin, the deputy director of the Children's Defense Fund, New York. This is WNYC, WNYC.org. I'm Leonard Lopez. President Obama has a mixed legacy when it comes to immigration. He has fought for legislation to help undocumented immigrants, but he has also been called the deporter-in-chief for the large numbers of deportations that have occurred under his administration. Do you think he's left a positive or a negative impact for the children that you're dealing with?
I think there have been additional resources that the Justice Department is looking at to increase to help these children. I think that there is more. As an advocate, I will always say that there is more that can be done for the children that are coming across, to not re-traumatize them, to make sure that we expedite the process, but in a way that safeguards their protections and their claims. And so I have to say it is a mixed bag.
Well, one member of Congress has said that all of the kids coming across from Mexico have calves the size of cantaloupes because they're small, but they're carrying so much marijuana across the border.
I mean, that's just pure racism in my point of view, and it's ignorance, and it's really statements to generate fear, and not based in reality.
Are the children you work with ever deported?
The children are repatriated back if their claims are not made. If those claims are made when they are made and they do not have legal services or legal representation, then we have a concern that the claims were not adequately raised. But there are sort of programs to help repatriate safely, and I don't know that it is safe at this point when there is so much violence and poverty in the countries that they are coming from.
And we know that kids who do get sent back do get killed. The other population that we've seen a large percentage of children coming in with are those with parents, which have really paralleled the numbers of unaccompanied immigrant children. So the accompanied children are also at risk for deportation with their families, and they're at risk for getting killed as well.
What about the ones who are not accompanied? How did they wind up in New York City? I could understand they're winding up in Arizona or New Mexico or Texas or even California, but New York City is pretty far from the border.
Well, those who are apprehended at the border, that's where they are apprehended. But they are, if they have potential sponsors in these states like New York, then they will be sent to New York to look for those sponsors, to try to get those sponsors to help them through the immigration reunification process. So I think California, Texas, and New York are the largest states taking in these kids at this point.
I mean, if you think about it, a lot of Central Americans are not going to settle in Arizona. So, a lot do settle in communities in New York.
Why Joe Arpaio isn't happy to see them? Is that the problem?
Exactly. And so many have settled in New York City. Many have settled in Long Island. There's large Central American communities. And so the reunification process is really to send a child back to a family member.
Are there certain communities in the area that are stronger in their support systems for these children? Is the South Bronx particularly good?
New York City has been fantastic. New York City, from all levels of government and private and non-for-profit organizations, have really rallied around these children. I'm sad to say the same is not true for Long Island, where children have been have had trouble getting into the school system. All children, regardless of their documentation status, are legally have a right to be in school. And so it's very troubling for us to see communities in Long Island that have tried to block kids from coming in.
Do you think it's partly because New York City is a city of immigrants, so people are more in touch with their own histories?
I think that's true. I think the commitment.
Suburbia was an escape from all of that.
Right.
It's not
But the
that
New York
they have
City
to
Council
pay for it.
commitment to
Gotta be
assisting
racism.
these
It's not that they
unaccompanied
have to
immigrant
pay, not for
children
their
in
own
legal
kids,
services just
but for everybody
demonstrates
else
the
in the
commitment that New York
world.
City
Why?
has
That's all I
made,
don't
as
understand.
Alan said, on all levels to the kids that are coming.
Should I assume that Children's Defense Fund has a presence in Long Island?
We're working with partners in Long Island, absolutely.
I would say
What
that,
about terra firma?
yes, in fact, because of Children's Defense Fund, who have been just incredible advocates for these children, we're trying to now replicate terra firma at a couple of sites in Long Island through the CDF.
Now, what about the economics of all of this? We hear about coyotes bringing people across the border, and they have to pay for that service. Do these kids arrive as
In debt.
very, very young or young teenagers in serious debt? How does that get dealt with?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the problems we have with keeping kids in school is that there's a conflict between them being in school during the day and actually working to pay off that debt. I think luckily many of the children we see have family members that are footing that bill and really helping the kids and letting the kids go to school. But some of the older kids, some of the children that don't have closer family ties really are bound to make that money to pay their families back, or sometimes those families back in their home countries can be victims of violence because they haven't paid back debt.
Or they could be joining families that are here where the families are undocumented. So does that just add to the legal problems?
There are many layers of legal problems with the immigrant community. We have many mixed families where you have documented and undocumented within the same family, and that causes all sorts of issues around legal status. But at the same
And
time,
in fact, that's become part of the political debate whether children born here who are automatically U.S. citizens should be considered automatically U.S. citizens.
well, that is the law of the land. That's where we are now.
You should tell that to some politicians.
I can, but I think that we do need to look at these different mixed families as far as status, but also know that within New York City we are, as Alan said, really willing to provide the services to make these families whole, whether it's going to school, whether it's housing, whether it's education or health care.
And so much of this has to be done in Spanish. Has that become a problem?
Para nosotros, no. No. Our health center serves a large Latino population, and so the vast majority of our staff speak Spanish. Interestingly, we are seeing more West Africans coming into the program and into the community, as well as ethnic minorities. So there are families who speak Mam or Quiche, and that does become more challenging, although we have translational services to be able to work with those families.
And that is especially a challenge within the legal piece of it in the courts. When you don't have the translators in these indigenous languages, then we really are not able to move the cases along.
In the past, it was largely Asian children who needed these services. So have we seen a lessening of that?
I think there's a growing of everything else, I think is what's happened. There are so many different languages that are, as we know, in Queens alone, there are, I think, over 200 languages or something. And so I think that within the court system, though, this really slows the system down when you don't have translators in all of these indigenous languages.
Thank you both so much for being on our show. Kimberly Chin is the Children's Defense Funds in New York Deputy Director, excuse me, and Alan Shapiro is the Medical Director and co-founder of Terra Firma, also the Senior Medical Director for Community Pediatric Programs, a collaboration between the Children's Hospital at Montefiore and the Children's Health Fund. It's been a pleasure having you on our show.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much, Leonard.